Hi, Jody. Thank you for joining
That's
me.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Why don't you go ahead and first tell me a little bit about yourself?
I'm Jody Potts-Joseph, and I'm Hän Gwich'in from Eagle Village, Alaska, which is on the Yukon River near the Canadian border. I'm a tribal citizen of the native village of Eagle and Tr'ondëk Hwëch'in First Nation in Dawson City, Canada.
You do many things, and among them, you're a dog musher. You recently took part in the 2026 Iditarod. What was your inspiration for running that race?
Well, I grew up in a dog sled, with my family mushing, and they were trappers. And so, my first mode of transportation was, as I was growing up, was dog team. And so, it's just like something that's in my blood, I would say. And, it's a part of our culture. When I was in third grade, our school principal did the Iditarod, and I still remember him watching his start, really blurry back in the early 80s. You could kind of tell it was him, but I remember that the whole community came together for him and like made his dog sled and his parka and his dog booties, and like everything was homemade back then. There was no like commercial anything you could really buy. So I thought that left an impression with me. Um, and then my brother, when he's 6 years older, he started racing dogs and really got into mushing. And so he had his own team, and he always took me on training runs. And, I always looked up to my brother. Like, he was so cool. I wanted to be like him. He always took me hunting and just like let me be his tail, never chased me off. He was always a good brother. And, those weekend dog runs that we would do, were just really like core memories. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved being with the dogs out on the land, the peacefulness of the trail. Seeing new country by a dog team is just so beautiful and special and unique in a different way to really bond both with the land and, with the dogs. So it's just, that's really my inspiration, is just kind of a combination of growing up with it and, my brother.
The Iditarod is a pretty intense race. It's 1,000 miles from the ceremonial start in Anchorage to Nome. What
Yep.
was the most challenging part for you during the race or before the race?
Well, I mean, just getting to the start line coming from a village, we can't drive out of our village, and Anchorage is a long ways. And, having 16 dogs, I had 17 that I took to Anchorage, 16 that I raced. But, you know, um, I almost thought like I'm not going to be able to get to the start line because there was just a challenge on why I couldn't mush out. I forget what it was. But then I was able to contact the Bush Airline Company in Fairbanks, and they gave me a really great deal in the form of a sponsorship. And then another sponsor came in really last minute and was like, "What's your most immediate need?" And I was like, "Well, I got to get to the start line." And he's like, "We'll cover it. Tell us what." And so that was 72 and sunny out of LA, and it was just like this person just reached out, and it was just the greatest blessing at the perfect time. I want to live and train on my traditional homelands. Like, it means so much to me. And but it's also a big challenge trying to get to races, when you can only fly out of the village in winter. Or I oftentimes mush to the nearest town on the highway system, which is Tok, and it's like 165-mile run from my house out to where we keep our truck and trailer for the winter, where we have a dog box and, can transport the dogs. So, it's just a lot of logistics. So logistics is a big challenge. The other thing, as far as being on the Iditarod Trail, for me, the biggest challenge was sleep deprivation. I absolutely love being on the trail. Love seeing the new country, the trail challenges, the technical parts of the race, seeing new country. It was just awesome. Loved every mile. But the miles where it was dark and I've only had 1 hour sleep in 2 days, like, just it was pretty tough. But I'm ready for more.
And
Sign me up.
and you did experience a scary situation. You encountered a bison on the trail. There's probably people don't realize that there are bison in
Yeah.
Alaska. And after trying to scare it off, and your pistol not working, you used tradition and your traditional knowledge that helped you in that encounter. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when my pistol wouldn't fire, I realized I had to go up and protect my dog somehow. And so, I was behind my sled trying to fire this pistol. It didn't work, so the bison had charged 4 times at that point, and it was head down, pawing again. And so I ran through the deep snow. Didn't want to be on the trail because I was fearful that it would see me as a threat and gore me. So I went kind of off to the side in the deep snow, tripped on my way. There's a tree up there right next to the front of my team, a big spruce tree. And so I went and kind of hid behind that. I knew I needed something, a barrier in case it decided to charge me. And I just started hollering at it and throwing sticks, and it wasn't phased. And then I remembered the story of my grandma going to protect her children, and she was home alone and didn't have a gun. She just confronted a grizzly bear that was, coming into her yard, and she just went right up to it face to face and just hollered at that bear, Antla chincha, chichune huchina. And that means go away, have mercy on us. And so that just occurred to me. And so I just hollered at that bison as it was just about to charge again. I said, Antla chincha, chichune huchina. And that bison just looked up, it kind of glanced at me, and then it just turned around and ran up the trail, up into the hills. And it was just, I was like, did that really just happen? Like, I almost couldn't believe it myself. And then I was like, I'm going to tell this story and people aren't going to believe me. Like, I can barely believe what just happened. It's just like, because the bison left and then it was just calm. The dogs were all in a big tangle. They were looking at me and I was kind of looking around, and I just stood there for a little bit, just looking around. And then that's when I decided to record a video that I think, got shared pretty widely. So, to document, the whole ordeal. But I look back on it now, and everything. I'm a strong believer that everything happens for a reason, and there is a reason that I switched out my 30-30 lever action rifle that I always carry with me in my dog sled, and why I decided to take a friend's Glock, and that Glock didn't work, which is a little bit kind of more common with Glocks in the winter weather. And then it happened for a reason like that. And, there's nothing I could do about it except for, really rely on traditional knowledge on, our people say that animals understand our language. If you talk to them in our language, they'll understand and respect that. So it came true for me, and it worked, and it saved my life, the life of my dogs. I seriously thought it was just going to use its horns and just gore all my dogs, and uh, that was when I heard that click, that was really frightening, but I'm just so thankful that it worked out, and so thankful I really had the strength and courage of my grandmother in that moment.
And that's such an awesome story to hear how you used your culture in that way. And also in other parts of the race, including with your dogs, you had the community. When we see somebody in Indian country, down here in the lower 48 or in Alaska or really around the world, the community comes and supports and cheering on that person, no matter what, if they're in sports, entertainment, there's a lot of cheerleaders across the country for folks. And, you had some women come together and make some dog blankets. What is
Yeah.
that?
Oh man, that was just so special and powerful, and I think super significant, for our people and really our connection to dog mushing and our legacy. Really, one of the things I always wanted to do was have dog blankets, for races, but it was really hard for me to ask anyone. So I went to this woman in our community that is Robin Renfro. She works for Doy Unlimited. She is a really awesome community organizer, does a lot for people, and she's just good at that stuff. And so I told her about my idea, and I said, I have a hard time. I can't even write a post to ask on social media. And so she drafted me a post, and I did a few edits, and I posted in like less than 24 hours. I had over 30 Native women from across Alaska, Canada, Athabascan women in the lower 48 that all wanted to participate and make a beaded dog blanket. And our people use these dog blankets like as we arrived in villages, for things like New Year's, celebrations and things like that. People would come from their trap lines or nearby villages. Um, our people, before we arrived in the village, we'd stop our dog teams and don the beautiful beaded dog blankets on them, and then switch out of our grubby gear and put on like our finest parkas and beadwork and things, and it was really a way of arriving in a community to honor them, to show respect and intention with your arrival, but also honor your dog team. Like, how some people take a lot of pride in like taking care of their car and wash it and, always try to make it look nice. Like for us back then, it was like that with our dog teams, like a lot of pride in your dogs. And everyone would always inspect the dog teams and look and talk dogs and, tell stories. And, I found that through this experience, through our native communities, anytime I was at tribal gathering or, potlatch or something, people like, especially elders, but a lot of people would come up and talk to me about growing up with dogs or their experiences, or give me some OITs, some old Indian tricks with dogs and racing. And so it's just like the community support, the blessing of these blankets that all these women made. I had a blanket for every dog, and each blanket has its own story and meaning by each of the artists. And they all said they put a lot of prayers, with every stitch. And it just like, I felt that. And the community support, like, you're 100% right. Like when our people are doing something, like, we get so much support. Like everyone backs them and is happy and proud. And I definitely felt that. And I don't think I really would have ever made it this far if it wasn't for the community support, from donations to like the advice to, when I do fundraisers at the tribal halls, and how everyone came together and, would help or donate or, participate. So yeah, it's just been an awesome, awesome experience. And I just feel super blessed.
And what does your dog team mean to you? What do dogs mean? It's like as a mom, and you're a mother, are they your children as well?
They definitely feel like it because, my husband and I have 5 kids, and they're all young adults. They're all out of the house. One came back to work in our community this last winter, and it's been so great. But now that the kids are all adults and doing their own thing, and they're all doing really well, like, I have time for dogs. Single parent for a lot of years until 5 years ago when I married my husband. He's Hän Gwich'in. Having to work and support my kids on my own. Um, I didn't have time for dogs, so I had to get rid of my dog team for about 6 years, 7 years. And, I gave my team and all my gear away, to Jesse Holmes, who won the Iditarod this year. And I was able to get some of my bloodlines back from him, and some of my gear, and started up again. And, these dogs have really given me a lot of purpose and fulfillment. And they're just like, they're my best friends. They're just like my kids. Like, how like people, you can't have a favorite kid. Like I know I can't. Like for generally, you
Supposed to
know,
have.
yeah, you're not supposed to. And I think for the most part, most people don't. But like, our kids are all unique in their own ways. They have their strengths and their challenges. And it's just the same with these dogs. Like I'm actually sitting here. There's my dog yard now. Um, my
Awesome.
sled. We still have a little snow left, so that's really nice. But yeah, it's and a lot of the dogs in my yard we have raised since birth. And so we have a few older dogs, but we've been for the last 4 or 5 years we've been breeding up our own dog team. And that's been working really well for us, being able to raise the dogs and train them how we want to our specs, and, really form that bond starting at birth with them. So, yep, they're all pretty awesome. I'm very blessed, and it's nice. Like I miss my kids a lot, and I'm really like my whole life revolved around them, when I was, especially as a single parent, right? Um, but now that I have dogs, if I didn't have them, I think I would be in really bad shape, like missing my kids. So it's good for me to have something to nurture and take care of.
Which one did you say is not your favorite?
I would say my not favorite one is Koki, but we're really bonded. We went through a race experience last year. She's an outstanding leader. She's the sweetest dog in the yard. I don't think I've ever heard her growl even. But looking at her right now in the yard, she usually comes in the house a lot, but she is a really good jihad leader, and her and I are just so bonded and connected, like our communication. We went through a blizzard in the Kobuk 440 last year. It's up in northwestern Alaska, and really challenging country. Challenging is a really hard race, but especially when a blizzard comes through. And she ran in single lead for, you know, over 300 miles of a 440-mile race, and she just really was shining, like finding the trail in a blizzard or listening. She couldn't find the trail, I'd see her looking, but I'd see it, and so I'd, G G G, straight, and she'd get on the trail and I'd say straight, and then she'd boom, she'd just lock in. And so I mean, it was just, and I we led a couple of teams to the safety cabin at the halfway point through that blizzard. So I just extremely proud of her, and she's just a really special and unique dog, and she's given us a couple awesome litters of pups. So yeah, but I mean, there's some big strong males that are just incredible, and yeah, it's fun. And I think the couple litters that I have right now, they're really showing a lot of promise, and I'm hoping that in a couple years I could be really competitive at some point, especially once I kind of get a handle on, the Iditarod. It's a long race. A lot of things can happen in 1,000 miles, and learning to really manage your team is the main thing on the race. Being able to really take care of your dog. Some things, like what happened this year, is totally out of my control, them getting sick. So we'll have to, I'm trying to come up with a different game plan for next season, because I'm going to go back. I'm not the type where I put my mind to something and never give up. So it's like, it was easy decision to scratch at the time because 9 of my 10 dogs were really, really sick. And it was kind of spreading throughout the race with other teams at kennel cough and then some stomach bug. But I'm pretty bound and determined to get to know them. Like my mom says, know 'em or bust. So yeah, we'll be back next year, and I'm going to try to do some races earlier in the season so they can be exposed. That's the challenge being in a village. I'm not exposed to all these other dog teams. So like a lot of the mushers, they live in a community where they're encountering other teams multiple times in any training run. There's so many dog teams around, especially on the highway system where a lot of these guys are from. But for me, being isolated out here, there's a lot of dog teams in our community, but they're recreational mushers and they're also isolated. And so we don't ever really, my dogs aren't exposed to disease or sickness. And so I think it really hit them hard in Iditarod, and after 650 miles, we had to pull the plug. But my dog's health and safety is the most important.
Times are hard and it's rough. And, we do have a lot of young people. We do have a lot of challenges in American Indian and Alaska Native communities, but we're resilient. And I come from strong matriarchs. You've shared some of your experiences from your strong matriarch. So, for all those young women out there, what is your big anti energy advice to them?
Our people have historically just, have been through a lot and faced a lot of challenges. And, you know, I have too in my life. My life certainly hasn't been easy. But anytime I've been confronted with something, I've always just had this mindset of adapt and overcome. And so just keeping that mindset of never giving up, and just really, you know, lean into your culture. I think our culture is like our greatest strength as Native people. And I know for me, my culture and that connection I have with our traditional homelands has been a real source of strength for me. And I just encourage our young people to just keep that mindset of never giving up, adapt and overcome, and always like really look to our traditional teachings for those ideas and solutions that'll carry you through.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Jody. Can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you, Tonya. It's good to talk to you.